In 2010, a lone single-engine plane crashed into the Echelon office complex in Austin, Texas. Thoughts the crash may have simply been an accident gave way to fears that this was a terrorist attack, and there may be more to follow. However, a lengthy note left behind by the plane's pilot revealed the true nature of the incident. It was no accident, and he had his reasons for the attack. Andrew Joseph Stack III, or Joe Stack as I'm going to call him, was born in 1956. Growing up in Pennsylvania, Stack was orphaned at age 4. That's a sad but promising start to a protagonist's life. Following movie logic, the more traumatic your childhood, the greater your potential. That means Joe probably developed superpowers in his teen years, and I'll probably never amount to anything because my parents provided me a stable childhood. Stack studied engineering in college before moving out to California to pursue a career in software engineering. This began his illustrious relationship with the tax authorities, a relationship that would span decades and see the closing down of 2 of Stack's software companies, fines that wiped out his retirement savings on numerous occasions, and eventually his death. A relationship the IRS would probably call a resounding success, or business as usual. In the early 80s, Stack was introduced to a group of people who were studying tax code. They were researching the special tax exemptions that religious institutions benefit from. You know, the type that make it possible for suspect preachers to set up what is ostensibly a business free of tax to become massively wealthy. Why do you need a mansion to do God's bidding anyways? Hiring some of the best tax lawyers in the business, the group decided to make use of these exemptions themselves, both to avoid tax and as an act of protest, an attempt to force authorities to reevaluate unfair tax laws. They would be abusing the law in the same way corrupt religious figures do, but making sure they followed all the rules and made it all transparent. In accordance with this, Joe Stack began claiming his home was a church, and as such he didn't have to pay taxes on any business conducted from it. Despite Stack claiming they followed the law and didn't do anything the big money-making churches don't do, the IRS was less than impressed. When they found out what was going on, it cost Stack $40,000. I learned that there are 2 interpretations for every law. One for the very rich, and one for the rest of us. For the rest of the 80s, Stack worked as a contract software engineer. Then, in 1986, a tax reform act was passed that made it harder for software engineers to label themselves private contractors. Of course, a private contractor is taxed a little differently than an employee, so this could really disrupt your business if all of a sudden your tax status had changed. Stack couldn't believe it. It was almost as if they wrote a law just to fuck with him. He spent thousands of dollars and months of his time trying to raise awareness and rally protest against this law. He spoke and wrote to politicians and anyone who would listen. He attended meetings. He organized professional groups. Keep in mind that all this time spent campaigning was lost income for his business. But it was all a waste of time and money anyways. The law stuck. After losing so much money fighting the regulation and now having that regulation impact his bottom line, Stack was once again in a precarious financial position. He began working 100 hours a week. However, by the 1990s, his business suffered under economic depression. The dot-com crash and restrictions on travel after 9/11 crippled his business. As a contractor, Stack had to regularly fly to meet with customers, and this was now very expensive and impossible in some cases, with airport security on high alert. Stack then watched the government give billions of dollars in aid to affected airlines while he got nothing. Ironically, the government had basically shut down an industry he depended on, which destroyed his business, and then used his tax dollars to fund that same industry. After losing his business and going through a divorce, Stack decided to move to Austin, Texas. Coming from California, Texas was surely a paradise for a man struggling with tax and a government, right? Not exactly. Stack found that the work for a software engineer in Texas was not quite as plentiful or fruitful as it was in California. Imagine that. Stack toiled away for years, taking on work when he could find it. To survive, he was forced to dip into his savings. After one particularly bad year, Stack failed to file a tax return. Why? Because he didn't make a cent. No income. He thought this spared him from filing a tax return, but mercy is not a word in the government's lexicon. Unfortunately for Stack, by the time he was notified the government wasn't happy with him, it was too late to file a protest with the court, so he had to just sit and take his $10,000 fine. By the late 2000s, Stack had another business and another marriage. He obviously didn't learn his lesson the first time. After his troubles with taxes in the past, he decided to get an accountant to handle his currently undocumented income. That way, no more mistakes would be made, and he could just get on with his life. Unfortunately for Joe, it feels like I've said that more than a few times now, his accountant neglected to report his wife's income too. Stack had no idea he was underreporting income until the government decided to audit him. Disaster. By now, Joe Stack was completely disillusioned with the government. He believed the freedom the United States provided him was a blatant lie, and that he was nothing more than a slave to the system, which made him jump through hoops just to protect his hard-earned savings, and in the end they could just wipe it all out if they felt like it anyway. Throughout his life, he was a mild-mannered man. He was a father, he was a hobbyist pilot, he had a love of music and played bass in a band. But now, at 53 years of age, Joe Stack was at the end of his rope. His anger at his situation grew increasingly frightening for his wife, who took her daughter to a hotel for some space on the 17th of February 2010. The very next day, Joe Stack would act on his frustrations in an attempt to defy those who had wronged him. "Oh yeah, that's right. You spent all this time listening to me drone on about finances. You're ready to get to the action. Admit it, you didn't click on this video to hear about taxes. In all honesty, I didn't choose this topic to talk about them either. Take it away, Mr. Stack." On the morning of February 18th, 2010, Joe Stack posted a manifesto/suicide note to the internet. In it, he details his lifetime struggle with the IRS and his growing cynicism with the American system. "I would only hope that by striking a nerve that stimulates the inevitable double-standard knee-jerk government reaction that results in more stupid draconian restrictions, people wake up and begin to see the pompous political thugs and their mindless minions for what they are. Sadly, though I spent my entire life trying to believe it wasn't so, but violence not only is the answer, it is the only answer. The cruel joke is that the really big chunks of shit at the top have known this all along, and they have been laughing at and using this awareness against fools like me all along. I saw it written once that the definition of insanity is repeating the same process over and over and expecting the outcome to suddenly be different. I am finally ready to stop this insanity. Well, Mr. Big Brother IRS man, let's try something different. Take my pound of flesh and sleep well." Joe Stack then set his house on fire and left for the airport, where he rented a hangar for his Piper Dakota aircraft. At 9:45 a.m, he took off. His last words to the control tower were, "Thanks for your help. Have a great day." Around 10 minutes later, the same aircraft travelled at full speed into Echelon 1, a business complex which housed IRS offices. The craft exploded on impact, causing much damage to the building and starting a fire. Joe Stack was killed on impact. IRS manager Vernon Hunter was also killed. 13 others were injured, 2 critically. Though they were able to eventually resume operations at Echelon 1, between the loss of documents and man-hours of work, the attack cost the IRS millions. They spent further millions on improving security at their offices all across the US. Most of that just went into employing more security guards though, so unless they came equipped with anti-aircraft weaponry, it wouldn't do much to stop a similar attack. This is the US we're talking about though, so you never know. In all, the IRS reportedly spent $38.6 million. So, did anything change? No, not that I'm aware of. You know how you sometimes hear people call a regrettable expenditure a tax write-off? Well, this is basically the equivalent thing for the taxman. Business is good enough that they can foot the bill for the occasional suicide attack. As long as their business makes more money than suicide attacks, they're doing alright. Joe Stack was well aware of this, of course. In his manifesto, he admits he knew business would continue as usual after his attack. He just hoped enough people would take notice, and maybe one day there'd be too many people done with the IRS to ignore. Maybe this video has elicited some admiration from you, maybe even some inspiration, but I would advise you not to fuck around with the IRS or your country's equivalent, because one thing is universally certain: the taxman does not fuck around. Think back to any of my previous videos where I mentioned someone was having trouble with their taxes. How did that end for almost every single one of them? But hey, if you want me to do a video on your tragic demise, be my guest. And if you want to hear a similar tale of a man taking all he could stand until he couldn't stand no more, why not check out my video on the Killdozer, where a man made a tank out of a bulldozer and went on a rampage. Or my video on Sean Nelson, who made a tank out of a tank and went on a rampage. I even have another video of a pilot flying a small aircraft into a building over perceived wrongs. Yeah, I have so many videos now, it's like I have one for every occasion. And if you've already seen all of those videos, well, firstly, thank you for the support. And secondly, subscribe, you miserable bastard.